You know, one of the great characteristics of this president is his willingness to really take on, not just the establishment, take on real lies, like birthright citizenship. The president says he wants to do away with birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. And he's right. Now let's step down. Let's go through this a little bit. Let's take a look at the 14th Amendment. Go ahead. Let's read the balance. I wish we had a bouncing ball here. Let's pretend we actually understand basic English here. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That's not what that says, right? Now, if it said that, then there'd be a different issue. But it goes on. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, comma, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, comma, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And I hear, keep it there, I hear these professors on TV, they go, well, those words, and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, those 6 words, were they ambiguous? This is where the battle. No, it's not. The 14th Amendment was written to ensure that the freed slaves after the Civil War would be recognized as citizens in every state and in the United States. It's an amendment to the Constitution passed by the state legislatures or conventions of states to ensure that the newly freed slaves were citizens of the states and of the United States. See anything there about aliens? You see anything there about foreigners? No. It has nothing to do with them. They never even contemplated conferring jurisdiction on anybody who comes into the country illegally and has a baby. Can you imagine? Of course they didn't. So the Constitution does not say that. The Constitution has never said that. Never said that. Matter of fact, Jacob Howard was the United States Senator who drafted the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And he gives us some insight. You know, we are originalists. So we look at the text of the Constitution and we interpret it based on the meaning at the time that the Constitution was ratified, or in this case, the amendment was ratified. And here we don't have to guess. He told us, Senator Jacob Howard, author of the 14th Amendment, the Citizenship Clause. Here's what he explicitly said. You know, we don't have to look for the invisible ink for the abortion clause and the this clause and that. This isn't made up. This is historical fact. Every person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction, that of the states, is by virtue of national law a citizen of the United States. This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, who are aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers credited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. Now, wait a minute. So it's not only excluding aliens and foreigners, surely illegal aliens, will include every other class of persons. It settles the great question of citizenship and removes all doubt as to which persons are or are not citizens of the United States. This has long been a great issue in the jurisprudence and legislation of this country. Keep it there. Am I missing something? Am I missing something? No, I'm not missing anything. That particular clause in the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with illegal aliens and their children. Zippo. It does not confer jurisdiction on the children of illegal aliens. If they wanted to do that, they knew how to write. They would have said it. And yet, Jacob Howard on the floor of the Senate said the opposite. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll give you a little historical background as well. There's never been a United States Supreme Court decision that has interpreted that clause of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, to confer citizenship on the children of illegal aliens. Never. There was a decision in 1898 involving legal residents in the United States. Two Chinese legal residents in the United States who had a child in the United States. And the Supreme Court ruled that that child was a citizen of the United States. But notice what I said. Legal residents in the United States have a child, that's a citizen. Now, interestingly enough, that was an activist decision. That's not what the 14th Amendment says either. But still, they didn't say anything about the children, the babies of illegal aliens. Now, that part of the 14th Amendment was codified in a federal statute in 1952. And some lawyers are out there preposterously saying, but see, it's in this statute, so Congress has made a decision that that is how you interpret that language. That statute doesn't interpret it as including illegal aliens. That's 1952. It does not. You have other statutes that include provisions of the Constitution. That provides us with no insight whatsoever. In fact, let me tell you a little secret. Where did this come from, birthright citizenship for illegal alien babies? It's not in the Constitution. It's not in any federal statute. It's not in any federal court decision. Where did it come from? Nobody's 100% sure. It came out of the bureaucracy. In the 1960s and early 70s, because of significant changes in our immigration laws in the Hart-Celler Act, excuse me, during the great days of the Great Society, which very much liberalized our immigration laws, a lot of people were coming into the country, and it was very difficult for the bureaucracy to figure out if they were citizens, children of citizens, and so forth and so on. So the Social Security Administration and other departments and agencies of the federal government started to hand out citizenship certificates. And it spread. President, through executive order, no president has ordered citizenship for the children of illegal aliens, not in the 60s and 70s. Congress didn't do it. No federal court did it. The Supreme Court didn't do it. The bureaucracy did it 50 years ago. So you're going to hear people say, hey, look, you can't change the Constitution with an executive order, Mr. President. What are you, knucklehead? Excuse me. If the president issues an executive order, he's the president. He's in charge of the executive branch. As an example, the Social Security Administration isn't in charge of the executive branch. The old INS, now I guess Department of Homeland Security, which has subsumed it, that isn't in charge of the executive, but the president's in charge of the executive branch. Why the hell can't he issue an executive order and say, you know what, that interpretation 50 years ago is wrong, here's my interpretation. And not only that, he'd actually be reinstating the original understanding of the 14th Amendment. Now, there are result-oriented activists out there, professors, judges, and the rest, who will take the opposite position. We have so many activist judges now, including on the U.S. Supreme Court, that my fear is that they will uphold what the bureaucracy has done and write some cockamamie decision about how it's enshrined in the Constitution, but this has been our practice for half a century, and therefore this, that, and the other. They'll find a way around it. But I am telling you, not as an activist, but as an originalist, there's no constitutional basis or statutory basis for birthright citizenship. This was done in the shadows by the bureaucracy, and it's spread, and it's been embraced ever since. That's how they got around the Constitution. And I do fear a federal court or the Supreme Court will rubber stamp it. But that's the truth. But people don't understand this, or they don't want to understand. I'll give you an example of one of them. His name is Paul Ryan. He's the Speaker of the House of Representatives right now. And he immediately did an interview, and he immediately came out and he said, you can't end birthright citizenship with an executive order. We conservatives don't believe in that. We didn't believe in that with Obama. You can't change the Constitution with an executive order. The president's not changing the Constitution with an executive order, nor is he trying to overrule a federal statute. That's what Obama did with DACA. When there was no authority, statutory or otherwise, for Obama to convey effectively legalization, at least on a temporary basis, to millions of people here illegally. He even had said earlier in his presidency he didn't have the power to do it, and he doesn't have the power to do it. That's not what Trump is doing. Trump is saying, hey, my branch of the federal government has been wrongly interpreting this for a long time, for decades. There's no constitutional statutory basis for this, so I'm putting it back in the box. Now, if we want birthright citizenship, let Congress pass a law. I won't sign it, but that's what they can do. They say, well, you got to amend the Constitution to do what Trump wants to do. You have to amend the Constitution to state what the Constitution already says because some bureaucrat or bureaucracy contravened the Constitution? No, 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 no. We don't need to go through a constitutional process, an amendment process, that is, to reverse what isn't already in the Constitution. So this is the bar they put up there for the president. You have to amend the Constitution? No, you don't. This is the other bar. Well, you need a statute. And so when we talk about an executive order, you get these people who really have no idea what they're talking about, like Paul Ryan. And let's point it out. Here's what he said yesterday. Go.
Well, you obviously cannot do that. You cannot end birthright citizenship with an executive order. We didn't like it when Obama tried changing immigration laws via executive action, and obviously as conservatives, we believe in the Constitution. As a conservative, I'm a believer in following the plain text of the Constitution, and I think in this case the 14th Amendment's pretty clear. Mm-hmm. And that would involve a very, very lengthy constitutional process.
So he's not only misinforming the audience, I believe he is unmoored from the historical fact, and he's already telling me to be a very, very lengthy constitutional process. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't get out of Congress with 2/3 vote of both houses. And even if it did, you're not going to get 3/4 of the state legislatures or conventions of those states to approve it. But you shouldn't have to. Trump's not trying to get around the 14th Amendment. He's not trying to get around Article 5 of the either amendment process. He's not trying to get around a federal statute with an executive order. Those don't exist. What he's trying to do is put it back in the box. But listen to the stupidity. Anderson Cooper on CNN. Anderson Cooper 360. It should be Anderson Cooper cuckoo clock. And there they are. They're clashing over birthright citizenship. Let's see if you can follow this. Cut 7. Go.
Joining me now, former RNC chief of staff and CNN political commentator Mike Shields, CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, and Republican strategist Rick Wilson.
Let's stop right there. Toobin is a crackpot. And the guy on the right is a Republican operative. I think his name is Rick something or other. And he hates Trump. And he pops up on MSNBC and CNN endlessly, trashing Trump. Go ahead.
Author of Everything Trump Touches Dies.
There you go.
Jeff, so first of all, the president claimed...
So why would you have a guy like that on? Everything Trump touches dies. Unless you want him to trash the president, right? This is how the news does it. Go ahead.
Can end birthright citizenship with an executive order. Obviously seems from every legal scholar I've heard from a non-starter. I just want to read to the viewers the 14th Amendment, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they
Now, this is a news program, right? Look at the headings there. President Trump makes dubious claim just days before midterm that he'll ban birthright citizenship. He can't. It's a news program. So, number one, they say he can't, and number two, they're trying to tie it to him using this, you see, as a way to pick up votes. Keep in mind, Trump didn't even bring the subject up. He was being interviewed yesterday by a couple of reporters who brought it up to him. And then he addressed it. He was actually surprised that they knew that they had been discussing it over at the White House. So Trump didn't bring it up just days before the election. The media asked him about it, and he answered it. And he answered it, and I thought, in a very thoughtful way. Go.
He can't change that with an executive order, correct?
Well, he not only can't he change it with an executive order, even an act of Congress couldn't change it because the
I'm so sick of this doofus, former federal prosecutor, who has no idea what the hell he's talking about, and it's constant with this guy. So what he's about to say, before he says it, is what Paul Ryan said. It's enshrined in the 14th Amendment. That was the intention of the 14th Amendment. You can't reverse it. No, executive order. You can't even reverse it with a statute. That's how crazy this is. And by the way, that's probably the position of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sotomayor and several of the others, because that's what they want. Go ahead.
Constitution trumps any other attempt by a state or the federal government to do anything. This is a political stunt.
How can it be a political stunt when Trump didn't bring it up? The reporters brought it up, and he was responding to them, and he was surprised they even knew that there was discussion going on in the White House about it. This CNN is really a grotesque operation. Go ahead.
Whether it will succeed, but the idea that the president could change birthright citizenship, that anyone could change it other than through a constitutional amendment, is simply false.
Now, keep in mind, these are people who are constantly changing the Constitution, right? It is constant. They don't have any fidelity to the Constitution or the amendment process. The Constitution hasn't been amended in decades, officially. But it's amended all the time by the Supreme Court. And when it is, particularly when the push is to the left, they love it. Go ahead.
So, Mike, I mean, as a conservative Republican, are you okay with the president saying that he can unilaterally change
so this? Is now he's positioned. He's pigeonholing this guy. I don't know who he is personally. I understand he was a lawyer for the RNC or whatever. You're a conservative Republican. You buy into this? So we have a false premise. We have false information being put out. Now, in essence, he's being pressured. You have integrity as a conservative Republican? Don't you believe in the Constitution? That's what's going on. Go ahead.
The 14th Amendment of the Constitution? And do you agree with Jeff that, I mean, this is basically just about politics and manipulation before the midterms?
Well, a couple of things. Senator Graham also lent his voice to the idea that this hasn't been tested, and what jurisdiction are people under? Are they under the country that they're from?
Let me get the snarky look in the middle, the constipated look from this guy Tubin, and the guy on the right looks like a Martian, and he'll jump in a minute, I'm sure. Go ahead.
Or they under U.S. jurisdiction. But look, here's what this real issue is about, and whether or not you can change it this way or whether or not you have to change it legislatively, this is a legitimate conversation to have because birthright citizenship is being abused. And there are 700,000 immigrants in line right now to become lawful immigrants to the United States from Africa, Latin America, Asia, all over the world. And yet there are loopholes that allow people to get into the country illegally, have a child, and become a citizen. Harry Reid, when he was in the Senate, Democrat, not hardly a conservative, said, you know, birthright citizenship is being abused.
Now you can see the guy in the middle, Tubin, he is the spittle. You can see he's ready to lurch. He cannot believe what he's hearing. The guy on the far right, he's zoning in like a Martian coming off a spaceship, and they're getting ready. Go ahead.
Look at it. Many of the Republicans running for president in the primaries last year brought this up. So it's not like it's an issue out of left field. And immigration is a defining difference between the two parties. The Democratic Party, their vice chairman wears a T-shirt that says we're for open borders. Republicans watch that and go, wait a minute, we've got to get even more sort of aggressive about how it is we go about protecting the border. Maybe we ought to look at something that's being abused that allows illegal immigrants to come in and game the system when there are 700,000 people waiting in line dutifully to become American citizens.
That is precisely wrong. And it is important to point out that we actually have laws in this country where there are procedures.
Tell me, pal, which law? Which one, Mr. Former federal prosecutor and legal analyst for CNN, which law was adopted by Congress or by the states that confers citizenship, birthright citizenship on our legal aliens? Which one? Stop blowing me kisses, too. I'm talking to you. Go ahead.
If you want to change birthright citizenship, help yourself. That is a perfectly legitimate argument to have, but you have to have it on the right subject, which is a constitutional amendment.
No, you don't. Again, a court will likely rule that because the courts are out of control. When you saw what Trump did when he had one Obama appointee after another on his temporary halt on immigration of refugees, and in the end he won out. But these are such buffoons. They have no idea what they're talking about. Go ahead.
To do it as a stunt a week before the election.
He didn't do it as a stunt. He was asked about it. He didn't bring it up. He was asked about by one of you clowns, a reporter, and he gave an honest answer about what they were thinking about. They immediately attacked him. Now he's explaining what it is that he wants to do. Go ahead.
Pretending that you as president have the power to change it, that is not legitimate. That is not a legitimate debate.
No, only the Social Security Administration can change it. No. Only the vast mass of bureaucracy can change our Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. The President of the United States is not allowed to control his bureaucracy. The President of the United States is not allowed to tell them to knock it off, that that's not what the Constitution says. Go ahead.
And I think it's demagoguery. It's not policy.
This is absolutely a stunt. This is absolutely the president once again.
Now we have this schmo, a Republican strategist who hates Trump. So it's a stunt that Trump didn't even bring up. Just a stunt. You're concerned about birthright citizenship, ladies and gentlemen? That Martian over there thinks this whole thing is a stunt because he's a hate-filled Trump hater. Go ahead.
This performative version of the presidency where he throws out red meat so he can start this next news cycle on Fox.
He didn't throw out anything. You know what? I've had enough of these goofballs. This is why people can't stand the media. It's not because Trump says it's fake news. It's because you and I watch this. But that's not it. Chuck Todd. You know, he's supposed to fill the shoes of Tim Russert. He'll never fill the shoes of Tim Russert. Tim Russert was a serious journalist. Now, he'd been a Democrat his whole life. He worked for Scoop Jackson. He worked for Pat Moynihan, two former and deceased now senators. But he really worked at being a journalist, not Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd worked for Tom Harkin, a left-wing kook. And Chuck Todd's wife is still a Democrat activist. Chuck Todd is what he is. But he knows nothing about this either. So what happens is these gaggle of reporters, they have groupthink and they just keep regurgitating the same thing. Here he is, MSNBC, Chuck Todd. Go.
Welcome back. Tonight I'm obsessed with this question. How do you cover a dishonest proposal from the President of the United States honestly? So today the President proposed doing away with birthright citizenship, the constitutional right that any child...
Stop. Today the President didn't propose anything. For the 4,000th time, he was asked a question and he answered it. And he honestly said what they're looking at. So why do you have to create this sort of evil intent? Because they want to continue with their argument that he's a racist, that he's a divider. That's why. And by the way, who's your barber? Go ahead.
Born in the United States automatically becomes an American citizen. Now, what the president really is proposing is that we stop talking about bombs sent to his political opponents by a political supporter, that we stop talking about whether a mass murderer was somehow influenced by his words.
Whoa. Do you believe this? Is that mass murder somehow influenced by his words? There is absolutely no support for that grotesque allegation whatsoever. But what do you expect from the Kavanaugh media? This mass murderer didn't even like Trump. He was frustrated with Trump, who surrounded himself with Jews. This is just outrageous. And you have a nut like this guy with the pipe bombs. You had a nut with a sniper rifle in Alexandria, Virginia, shooting at Republicans. Does anyone remember Chuck Todd, Democrat, wrapping that around Bernie Sanders? Of course not. This is a very, very outrageous, insane rant. Go ahead.
Policy proposals, that we stop talking about the connection between his rhetoric and a spike in ethnic attacks, and that we start talking about...
I just showed you what a liar he is on those FBI reports, didn't I? A spike in ethnic attacks. This is just all, it's not fake news. These are flat out lies. Go ahead.
Matters.
You know what? Shut up, moron. I don't even want to hear from you anymore. It's really quite preposterous. And I think that's about all I can take tonight. Probably you too. That's it.